Rabbi Asher, really, I want to encourage you. You make these assumptions, that like this is the way it was, and this and that, and there's just, where did you get it from?
You have to give me an example. I have no problem quoting my own opinion, but I typically say when it's my opinion. Now, I do build a consensus on many different opinions, and I'll say, well, Judaism leans towards this direction. I'm pretty sure that if it's not my opinion, I'll give a source or sources.
Well, but it has to be, if you're talking about Torah, I mean, there should be some kind of source in the Gemara, at least, I mean, you like to say everything has to come from and I agree with that in a lot of ways. I mean, even what the Chachamim say usually has a source in the Torah somewhat. I mean,
everything metaphysical brought down by Chazal, for it to be binding, has to have a Torah source. Their job is to rule on halacha, not on metaphysical issues.
Of course, Judaism emphasizes, I'll go back to the Kuzari, but, the Kuzari is an interesting explanation of Judaism. But the thing is, Judaism bases itself on doing. So halacha is what you have to do, and that's the most important thing. But it's not, in some ways, it's the most important thing to concentrate on. But the goal is to move your heart. Through your action, the end goal is, when we talk about what you call Kabbalah and things like that. First of all, everything's Kabbalah. Moshe Kibbutz Torah Mesinai. We're Makabel the Torah. Kabbalah Torah.
Yeah, that's a different type of Kabbalah. Transmission is not Lurianic Kabbalah. Nowadays, colloquially, Kabbalah refers to Lurianic Kabbalah, not the notion that Moshe received the Torah from Mount Sinai and passed it to Yeshua. And that's a completely different understanding of the word.
Yeah, I mean, it refers to mysticism, but, again, mysticism is completely misunderstood. I mean, it's really a wrong interpretation. The rabbis of the Zohar were the same rabbis of Gemara, and the things that they said...
Titles are the same, and the names are similar. That doesn't mean it's actually the same people. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of Midrashim, as they exist today, were really written in the Middle Ages. But you have Rabbi Akiva, you have the Rashi, you have all these people appearing in Midrashim when they never really endorsed them to be written. Only because something appears in the Zohar under the name of, Rav Papa, what doesn't mean that Rav Papa really said it. We're not obligated to believe that it's accurate. Right?
I don't like to get into these words, by the way, of apikoros or obligated to believe, because here, I just said a certain thing, because everybody's talking now. If you daven with a minion, you're making a chol Hashem. Like, all of a sudden now, davening with a minion is a chol Hashem. But here's the thing. What I'm saying is that they're using these terminologies. The yeshivas use these terminologies. If you don't agree with them, it's a chol Hashem. And the Sephardim, they use these terminologies. If you don't agree with them, you're not the chorus. Yeah,
but I take a different approach. That's what I'm trying to confront. The consensus, unfortunately, in the Jewish world today is what Moshe Perry is teaching, is that the example he gave in that discussion is that you have two babies that were just born, and from that time, from that instance, you already have one who's superior to the other just because he happens to have a Jewish pedigree. Okay, unfortunately, that's what most Jews believe nowadays, and that's why I'm challenging it. Now, do I need sources to challenge that, or can I just say, being that that's a metaphysical idea that is not endorsed within the Torah, then we can rightly call it foreign, right? It's just opinion. I understand it's opinion.
Now, again, the Torah has two parts. I mean, besides what we have to do, the Torah teaches us lessons on, we have certain obligations of what to believe. I call it, maybe knowledge of what we should know, we should know God. I would say that that's the goal. Of course, we emphasize on doing, unlike, I would say, many other religions. I don't want to say all religions, but, I would think, as far as I know, we emphasize the most on ritual and doing. That seems like from the Rambam, that from that, like he calls, instead of a person supposed to see himself going out of Egypt, he uses the practical term. How do we do that? Well, we show ourselves going out of Egypt. So the doing is the most important thing to concentrate on, but the goal has to be our heart, what's in our heart. And the way to get to it, so the
long story short,
No, the Torah
Do you agree with the position of Moshe Perry, or do you even agree with the position that appears in the Kuzari?
And I'll tell you, because
yeah, you quoted the Kuzari.
The Torah starts not with HaChodesh Hazayeh Lochem, like Rashi says in the first Rashi in Chumash. The Torah should have started with HaChodesh Hazayeh Lochem. It should start from what we're supposed to do, from halacha.
Right,
but it doesn't, because it's more important. In fact, when the whole story of Elazar, it so expounds upon the story of Elazar. Yafa sichasen shel avdei elvos mitorosim shel banim. So these stories and these morals and these things which are supposed to be part of what we call medrash, but this is the medrash of the Torah. But yes, stories are very important. Medrash is very important. What the Gemara spends pages and pages of Agadata. What? It's because of their health? Because they love telling stories? Because
that's how people learn back then. But the reason we have codifications nowadays was to separate the meat from the fluff. I mean, that's the main reason why we have codifications, where the Rambam extracted what was prescriptive from what was descriptive. I'm not saying that what's descriptive is completely disposable, but it's not binding to belief. That means it could help, it could hurt. There's clearly a lot of wisdom there. There's a lot of wisdom in Mishlei, but no one's going to call Mishlei Torah, right? But long story short, do you agree with the statement in the Kuzari?
Oh, for sure.
No, the statement. Okay, hold on, wait. So the statement the Kuzari makes is basically identical to the same statement that Moshe Perry makes, is that Jews are intrinsically superior.
Goes to show us that, the reason the Torah starts from Bereshis is basically that whole Torah until it starts talking about halacha is basically that concept that God Bereshis B'Shvil Yisrael Shenikra Bereshis. That's how it starts. That's the foundation.
That's a non sequitur. There, Rashi saying that God created everything and He could give Eretz Yisrael to whoever He wants has nothing to do with saying that Jews are intrinsically superior to Gentiles.
The whole narrative of the Torah, starting from Adam and goes down to Avram, that God shows Abraham, and it says God shows us in Egypt. It says He chose us. It goes, that whole narrative.
Yeah, but who's the us there?
Gracious and Shemos. That whole narrative was only to tell us that one principle.
So Chazal are adamant that there was more of the heir of Rav on Har Sinai than born Jews.
Right. We're not talking about born. We're talking about the Jews. No, the heir of Rav was part of the Jews, including.
Right.
They were chosen also. Not those who did not stand at Mount Sinai. And those who convert are Jewish people, just like anybody, just like I am. I mean,
you can use the example that because it says that basically God did this for the Jewish people or that for the Jewish people, that this means that Jews are intrinsically superior to Gentiles in any way. Right. Okay. So the Jewish people are ultimately a philosophy, not Basar V'Dam, right? That destroys the whole Kuzari argument. But the Kuzari teaches that Jews are intrinsically superior. The notion of a Pintele Yid and Yiddish Cup.
All
right, so you can't say that you agree with the notion that Jews are intrinsically superior. The two babies placed next to each other, that one is Jewish and one is not, that one is automatically superior to the other one, spiritually.
If the other one converted, he's exactly the same.
There's no decision made by children, but they both know nothing. To say that not knowing anything, one is superior to the other one.
Then he's the same. But until he converts, the other one's superior.
All right, so you're saying that a ger katan is superior to
Noah. A ger becomes a different being. He's like a reborn.
No, a ger katan is a baby that's converted to Judaism. You're telling me that this baby is on a higher level than a baby who knows nothing of no religion and may be born into Hinduism or Islam, not knowing anything either ethically?
That's what the Torah is telling us all along, that the Jews were chosen. Yeah, but that's
not the Jews. Those are the people who decided to enter Israel, and the bulk of them were part of the Arab Rav.
It's the same as the Jews.
No. It has to do with choice, correct?
Jewish people, you can join somebody when you like I'm sure when you got married, you joined your wife's family and she joined your family.
Okay.
So that's the way it is. You become Jewish. You're Jewish the same as anybody else. You know, many people, their son-in-law and their daughter-in-law are just like their children.
let me understand it differently here. You're saying that if someone happens to have Jewish blood or a Jewish mother, whether they believe in God or not, that they're automatically superior.
Or convert, the same. Or a convert.
Children don't choose to convert. Well, you're saying that if a baby is converted, then it's automatically superior to a baby that's not converted. What's the difference? I mean, aren't you saying that it ultimately has nothing to do with choice and free will?
He's obligated to be Jewish, right? I mean, that his kedushin is a kedushin, even if he never did the mitzvahs.
He's not high for any of the mitzvahs because he doesn't even know they exist. Assuming because he has more responsibility, he's more special. He doesn't have responsibility because he doesn't know anything. I mean, he's a baby. But are you saying that there were some babies that are superior to other babies?
Many people don't know that they're ever Jewish, but there's still, God consider, it says, Banim Atem L'Hashem Elokechem. You are children. Now, why is it that way? Well, we have the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I mean, it tells us, look, the Torah tells us throughout. I mean, look, the Torah keeps...
Yeah, but I haven't heard you quote a pasuk that...
Yeah, this week's parsha.
But I haven't heard you quote a pasuk that justifies your position.
God, yeah, even after we didn't listen to God, God will still, by the way. And it's interesting,
if you
want to go
tshuva,
into it, there's...
No, wait, hold on. If you do tshuva...
It doesn't say if you did tshuva. We'll never destroy you. How does he know if you're going to do tshuva or not? It doesn't say if you do tshuva. And
what do you mean?
The interesting thing is if you want to go into it, I mean, the truth is the Zera Shimshon and the Chaim, I think, talks about it also, that the next set of Patoch later in Devarim doesn't say this. Doesn't say that I'm never going to destroy you. Only this one does, which is an interesting thing. Whatever, that's a whole...
All right.
He says, because this is going on...
So that you're not understanding it clearly then. Well, the simple fact that we don't have the vast majority of the Shvatim in Israel is because God turned his back on them once they turned their back on God. This notion that God loves Jews unconditionally is not a principle found in the Torah.
God turned his head on us also. I mean, look, the Jewish people, whether this actually became true in reality. No matter what, the Jewish people, as much as people tried to destroy us, they couldn't. And we weren't always the greatest. We weren't always the greatest example of everything. I mean, but there were people that, look...
Yeah, but I think you're fooling yourself. I understand that someone who keeps Torah and identifies with Israel because he either converted or grew up in the belief system is clearly superior to someone who doesn't practice or believe in the God of Israel. Right? That's different than saying that, no, even someone who doesn't even know they're Jewish yet, like a baby or like someone you would consider a Tinok Shenishba, that they are still basically head and shoulders above a Gentile. Right? I mean, that makes no sense.
Don't say it doesn't make sense, because the first thing you have to know is what it says. And then you could try to understand it. What it says is that you are children to God. Children, Hashem has unconditional love for us. I mean, this says
never.
all over.
It never says, okay, wait. This notion of unconditional love doesn't appear in Torah, but the simple fact that the notion of charis exists shows that there's no unconditional anything, that it's up to you.
Well, there's punishment, but punishment is not punishment. By the way, punishment
yeah, that's not what charis literally means. I mean, charis means that you're cut off.
You're talking about what the Zohar says. It's like the Sharbit Hazov of Achashverosh. Hashem sticks out his beautiful staff to us. He's showing us the way.
According to the Chumash, I'm just sticking to the Chumash here. According to the Pashat of the Chumash, to be like Kares, to be cut off, like from Klal Yisrael.
Yeah, he's cut off. But it's a punishment that, who knows, it's a punishment. It's not necessarily a punishment. By the way, there's no such thing as punishment. If you look at all the big Rabbanim, my Rebbe, Rav Lev Fox, he wrote in Talmud, his introduction to Talmud Dvor, and he says it's known by all Chazal, and he says it was always known. There's no such thing as reward or punishment. It's just the punishment is Avera itself that is so bad. It's like sticking. It's like burning yourself. It's like you're hurting yourself, and God is only trying to guard you from it,
He's missing like the major onish there, which is gullus. Gullus is the best example of punishment for not keeping Torah.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the Averas were the punishment. The Averas was what did us in. It's not, we did ourselves in. God didn't really do us in.
That doesn't make sense to me. At least from the Torah.
I called it Shemayim, Chutz Miyirah Shemayim. We did it to ourselves.
Because it's part of a formula. God doesn't have to do it. And he says, if you do this and this, that will happen. He doesn't even have to act, right? I mean, I agree that the onish is bundled into the mitzvah, but that doesn't mean that God didn't initially put that into play. He's still God setting that formula into motion. I don't understand from the Chumash how you could come to a perspective that Jews are basically superior just because they happen to be Jewish.
Because
don't forget, like on Har Sinai,
God chose us. It says that God chose us. Let's take what it says. It says that God chose us. Now you're saying Har Sinai they have. So it's a question. You have a question, but it does say that God chose us. Bachar
doesn't mean to choose blindly. It's like to choose or to appoint for a purpose, really, right? And it's not us. It's the Erev Rav mixed with everyone else who was in Har Sinai who said Nativ and Ishma.
When God in Egypt, God says He chose us. Even Abraham, God promised him that his children will go to the land of Israel. He promised them.
Did all the children of Abraham go to Ephraim or Eretz Israel? Of course not.
Now you have a question,
right?
But first let's see what it says. But before you get to the question, see what it says. It does say that. Let's take it literally now. God promised Abraham that his children will go to the land of Israel and they're going to go out of Egypt. It doesn't say, there's no strings attached to it.
So you're not reading any context. Clearly, that's not what he meant, because Amalek comes from Abraham, Edom comes from Abraham, Esav comes from Abraham.
No, then you have to come on to the rabbi's
It was
interpretation.
contingent.
Now you're going to come on that says, Ki b'Yitzchak yikar l'chazar, that it's only in Yitzchak.
Right, Yitzchak.
The Yitzchak below, Kol Yitzchak.
Yitzchak is the father of Edom, no? It was still contingent of them following the derech.
No,
like,
it's basically
it's not just because of blood.
Yitzchak. In other words, Yaakov, only the children of Yaakov. In other words, so
why do we say in the Haggadah every year that we tell the evil son on Pesach that if you were in Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have been redeemed?
Right.
Why? Because it's a principle in Judaism.
The individual was redeemed, but the nation of Israel is a whole.
But you just said that the descendants of Abraham, there was no strings attached. They're promised to basically go into the land of Israel to be redeemed from Egypt as well. That's not true. It was always contingent on them believing.
So now you're going to get into what either with the Archaim or the Zerah, I'm not sure, or both. But what they say about the two Tochachas, that this Tochachah says what I said, it promises that I will remember the covenant that I had with Abraham, and I will never destroy you, no matter what, no strings attached. And the other Tochachah doesn't end like that. So he says, the first Tochachah is talking about the nation of Israel in general, everybody sinning, but God will never, as a nation, destroy us, no matter what, no strings attached. And then individuals are different. And the individuals, the second Tochachah is talking about individuals.
Oh, but the Torah doesn't say that. Nowhere in the Torah does it say that God won't ever destroy you completely. As a matter of fact, it says in the Tochachah, it says that he's going to rejoice with your enemies, and then Rashi has to step in and say, oh, that's not really what it means, and then he reinterprets it. Also, it seems like you missed an important part of that parak there, right before it tells you that he'll never abandon or forget the Jewish people. Right before that it says, and if they turn back to me, even this is conditional. Even this is contingent on us doing teshuvah. There's no unconditional love for the Jewish people if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Even when you're in the land of the nations, I will not destroy you. Doesn't say
wait.
Absolutely not if you do tshuva. If you do tshuva, it's for sure. We know you can do tshuva. We're talking about no matter what, I will never ever destroy you. No strings attached. It's a promise. There's no way. It's not a two-way agreement.
If you don't turn your back from Hashem, if you turn your back,
no, absolutely not.
This is what happened to the 10 lost tribes. The 10 lost tribes basically turned.
You don't need us to tell you that. We know that. We know you could do tshuva. Anybody could do tshuva. Anybody could do tshuva. God is not going to destroy you if you do tshuva, but even no matter what, it's a promise. It's a promise. There's no two ways over here. This is not a two-way.
It's contingent on you being in a covenant with God. If you choose not to be in a covenant with God, you're not important. That has nothing to do with blood, but as a matter of fact, the Torah doesn't lay down Jewishness and how Jewishness is transferred.
Sure.
Why? Because it always has to do with belief.
Remember the covenant with Abraham. Because Abraham's children were Jewish. And the
So we also know that the vast majority of Hebrews,
your seed will be like the dust of the land. It's not just talking about his seed. We know that a convert gets all the privileges of a Jewish person. It's like the children of Abraham, just as anybody else. They could say, Elokei Avram, Elokei
so it's tied to belief. It's contingent on belief.
No,
of you being
if a
considered
person goes to the mikveh and he joins the Jewish people, he gets all the privileges of the Jewish people. Now,
if he continues believing like a Jew. And you're saying that only because someone happens to be halakhically Jewish.
You're always a Jew. We know you're always a Jew.
No, you're halakhically Jewish, but that doesn't mean that you're special to God in any way. You know, Bernie Sanders, Karl Marx, Larry David are all halakhically Jewish, but are in no brit with God.
We make a blessing every day. Shalom Sadigoy. Now, I know, listen, a lot of these things, I said this, I did a Zoom meeting, and by the way, it's on my Facebook, with a bunch of converts that are potential converts and everything. Some of them were, not, but, a whole group from the Philippines we have. And, basically, I said this, that, I talked about the 3 converts of Hillel. I mean, the famous story with the 3 converts. And, so I said most converts can fit into one of those 3 categories of not believing in the oral law, or wanting to learn the Torah on 1 foot, or wanting to be a Kohen Gadol. These are categories, take not believing in the oral law. And I know you constantly knock, that's a medrash or this or that. I don't want to go into apokoros, because you see,
no, it's not oral law. That's the thing. Midrashim are not considered oral law.
Law is not the end goal. It's not the end game. The end game is to what's in your heart, and that is medrash. That is important.
You said it's not
that's
what's in your heart. It's you being halakhically Jewish.
No, we have to emphasize on doing, because that will bring your heart close to God. That's the only thing that's going to bring you close to God.
That Bernie Sanders and Karl Marx and every atheistical Jew out there is in some way still considered part of God's people?
Yes, of course, but they are. And
no, they're not. All right, so you're disagreeing with the Rambam. Like the Rambam writes in the third Perek in Hilchos Mamrim that people who deny Torah Shabbat Peh and basic principles of Judaism are no longer Israel. So what outside of all the other portions?
What happens if he goes under a chuppah with witnesses and says Harayat Mekudeshes Li?
So his kedushin is valid from a halachic perspective, but that doesn't mean that he's important to God in any way or in any covenant.
Well, if his kedushin is valid, that means he's still part of the Jewish people.
No, the notion of having a valid kedushin is a rabbinic notion. It's not a Torah notion. Only because there's a rabbinic law that deals with law and not with a covenant.
Wait. Where do you come up with that? The Torah talks about kedushin is from the Torah.
No. That the notion that someone doesn't have to be in a covenant with God or believe in God to have a valid marriage is not a Torah principle. You understand that?
What do you mean it's not a Torah principle? The laws of kedushin are from the Torah, right?
The principle that an apokoros, a min, that his kedushin is still valid, is not a Torah principle. That's a rabbinic principle. According to the Torah, he shouldn't even be alive. He's chayav misa for many different reasons.
Right.
So this is why, like being halakhically Jewish, what doesn't mean that you're in a covenant with God.
Wait. So you're saying that from the Torah, his wife can marry someone else without a get?
No. Well, first of all, from a Torah perspective, the Torah doesn't consider people who don't believe in God or keep mitzvot as part of Klal Yisrael. So that's a distinction I'm making. That according to rabbinic Judaism,
it doesn't mean that. It means only let them count them for a minyan or something like that. It doesn't mean for every. Listen, all these things. There's so many principles that are not black and white. But you have this. These YouTube rabbis like Rabbi Yaron Yeruvain. Well, I don't like to talk about people. Whatever. The idea that they say, every Michal Shabbos is not going to burn in Gehenna, you're a kofer or whatever, you're an apokoros. What I'm saying is not everything's black and white. In other words, for instance, there's a Gemara in Chagiga that says that if you learn Torah, you're safe from Gehenna. Does that mean I could say, I'll do everything, I'll eat on Yom Kippur and I'm just going to learn Torah? Of course it doesn't mean that. It means everything, everything has its balance. There's not everything is black and white. Sometimes, yes, it can save you from Gehenna. In other words, because God, you're trying your best and you're learning Torah, and so it'll save you from Gehenna. Yes, but
I think you're losing the point of our initial discussion.
No, I'm saying that not everything's black and white. In other words,
well, I'm just sticking to what the Torah says. It seems like the Torah makes a distinction between people.
Because I'm saying what you said. The reason I said that is because what you said about, people being considered Jewish or not considered Jewish. They're absolutely considered
but not Jewish.
In
the covenant. Well, the word Jewish doesn't really mean anything nowadays. I mean, it implies different things. Only because you're ethnically Jewish doesn't mean that you are in any covenant with God. Right? I mean, it calls them kagoy, it calls them kakuti.
Ethnic, I wouldn't call it ethnic because if you're a convert and you don't keep the Torah, then you're in the same boat as someone who's ethnically Jewish, quote unquote, and doesn't keep the Torah. You're in the same boat completely.
So that means that you're halachically Jewish, but that doesn't mean that you are still part of God's people when you're even believing God.
I could tell you that most Jews today, and most of the rabbis of the Talmud, the main rabbis of the Talmud, either were converts or came from converts. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the people that really gave over the Torah from generation to generation.
That statement means nothing if you believe that a baby could still be superior to a Gentile baby just because he happens to have a Jewish pedigree.
No, but I don't. It has nothing to do with pedigree. What I'm saying is pedigree, but
the only reason converts are important is because they chose this relationship. They chose this path. But a Jewish baby didn't choose anything. It was thrust upon him. But you're still saying
By the way, a person cannot convert. Okay, so on that point, a person cannot convert unless they want to, unless they choose to. So let me explain. So Chazal say, how does a baby convert?
Right?
Yeah. So how does that happen? Because we know that you have to do it with knowledge to want to, right? So we have a principle of Zechiyah that of course you want to. A child doesn't know that you want.
Conversion is not what brings you into a bris with God. Okay, the conversion just makes you halachically Jewish. There's people who convert for marriage. They don't even believe in God.
I'm saying a child that's converted is because he chooses to, because he knows it, so because it's good for him. And because it's good for him, it's called Zechiyah.
So they don't need permission to do something nice for someone.
Yeah, but it's like he chose it.
But they still make him confirm it when he's 12. So that shows that converting...
That's not true halachically. It's absolutely not true halachically. If a child never knows that he was converted and continued living as a Jew and never was given any choice, he's still a Jew. Unless they rejected it outwardly.
So why are you comfortable with that scenario, that a baby could actually, or a child could reject it at 12 and just go on his way, but a Jew could reject it at 30, 40, 50, and you still consider him special to God and part of the covenant?
Because because of Abraham, Isaac, because he
But you just said that a convert is basically in the same madrega as a born Jew, correct? If they both keep mitzvahs, yes or no?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So if a born Jew opts out, why is he still considered part of the people of God? But if a convert opts out at 12, he's considered a goy again.
Because if he opted out, that means he never really would have wanted to be in the first place.
I'm telling you.
It goes back to wants. It goes back to what he wants. What was his intention in the beginning? It's the same thing with the Amar of Riyah. What was their intention?
So the first siman in your day in the Shulchan Aruch, it talks about a momer lechachis. He makes a distinction between people who are angry for no reason and people who actually have a vendetta against God. And he calls them there, the Lashon is kakuti, but he has a status of a Samaritan. Like the understanding is that Kutians weren't, or at least some understand them not to be Jewish. Right. So it shows there's a certain level that you can drop to that severs the relationship between you and the Creator. But this notion that only because you're halachically Jewish, for sure like a Momer Lechachis, his Kiddushin is still valid. But no one in their right mind would think that he still has a covenant with God.
Okay, but then if the condition is still valid, you have to say that there's still some kind of relationship as a Jew between him and God.
That's bigotry right there.
What?
That's bigotry right there. What to think But that if a Jew does good, it's good, and if a Jew does bad, it's good. You know what I'm saying?
It's not saying that. Everything, and again, life is not about black and white. There's shades of gray. There is aspects.
Those shades that you're presenting makes Torah look backward and ridiculous, because you're saying that God favors people because
you don't understand something, first of all, you should not call it ridiculous. Even what you say, let's say, it's the things in the Gemara, it's Medrash. You have to understand that these rabbis, you have to understand who they were first. Don't make away
these... It's already like rabbi worship.
No, at the very least, one second. A little bit of humility. It's very important to have humility. That's why we go with Hillel all the time, because his humility as opposed to Shammai, who did not have humility.
Chazal even say that there is no covet of Rav, there's no covet of Bria when the Torah is being desecrated.
I'm talking about humility as far as the Rebbe, the Talmud, know who they were. They were very wise and great people. I mean, even
so they don't make silly statements in the Talmud? Are there any silly statements in the Talmud?
No, of course not. Listen, I mean, look,
when it says that Gerim are Kashim and like the Sapachat on Klal Yisrael, that's kind of
what it means. What, you just discount something without trying to understand it? You have to understand where these things came from great, great people, very smart people. We don't even come to their level.
So the Meforshim don't have a consensus on what that means. Avram Ager, but one of the Tosafos, is the only one that tries to give a reasonable response to say that means that they're so firm that they make Klal Yisrael frustrated. But everyone else brings that to teach, but that we have to be very careful who we let into our people. Basically teaching that we have no enemies from within.